Go.
I don't see the image changing on Facebook.
It will.
And the audio also.
It will. And this is also streaming, also what you're saying now.
Well, hi everyone. We are very excited to have Mr. Woodnote with us today, especially following our previous talk with one of his longtime collaborator, DubFX. Mikey, it's really good to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
And of course, Josep, the brain behind LiveLoop, professional live looping software. I think this is going to be a very interesting talk and looking at comparison between hardware and software. Before we start, I would like to say to everyone watching right now that you can send us some questions in the chat via Facebook or Twitch, and we will try to answer them depending on time. So please ask us, or especially Mikey and Josep, ask the questions. And to start, Mikey, tell us, how did you get into live looping?
Just probably the same as everybody else. I saw somebody else do it, and I thought, wow, yeah. I'd maybe seen it once or twice, but the time that I saw it and I thought, wow, was when I saw DubFX a long time ago now. Yeah, at a festival, and we'd been, a mutual friend had said he wanted us to jam, to do some music for like a poetry slam, and he wanted me to jam with this guy, and I met the guy and I saw him, obviously, and I thought, oh my goodness, and we got along. So obviously this is over 10 years ago, 12 years ago or something, and yeah, we've been friends ever since. But yeah, I saw him doing it and I thought, what the hell? And so yeah, I want to do that. Yeah, for sure.
I guess yeah, this is a story that you and Josep both share on some levels, right, Josep?
Yeah, for me it was the same. For me it was like I saw the video of Flow with DubFX and Mikey. That it was released, I think, 2009, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yeah.
And that video, wow! I saw how you use the saxophone and how you improvise. By the way, I still feel it was amazing solo and very well used of the effects. You know, the tone of the saxophone, the phrases, the melody, and I was a saxophone player by that time, but I was into classical music. I wasn't much into jazz, and then when I saw you dub effects and you playing and looping and doing solos, I realized, okay, I need to learn jazz first, so then I can do live looping, and this is what I did. It took me some while, but this is what I did.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That video was, yeah. I'd only, yeah. That was it. Maybe a year after we had met. We were actually living together at that point. That because we were busking. So after I met him, I just quit my job as well, and I was like, yeah, I just want to do this. So we'd been rolling around for about a year, and yeah, we were busking that day, and this really cool guy, Ben Dowden, this guy that we know, just filmed us. But yeah, I wasn't that good at looping yet then or anything. I'd only sort of just started, but we were already good friends and playing together like every single day. When about that video that you're talking about, yeah.
That's cool. And well, you came pretty far, I think, and I think it would be also an interesting point to tell us, how does one build a career as a live looping artist? If you can tell us a little bit about your journey so far.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm any particularly good example of anything to go by, and certainly I wasn't trying to build a live looping career. Like at the time, it was a really fun tool where we could do funky stuff. But what it let us do was play on the street. So it let us, it was such a good tool for playing on the street and just coming up with funky ideas. So yeah, I definitely wasn't trying to be a live looping artist. I always saw myself as like a saxophone player, primarily, and a musician, but the loop station was so cool because it meant that I could rock around with Lil Rhys and Eva Lazarus used to come with us for years and years, and we could just jam on the street. So it was this awesome. I don't want to say toy, but it is kind of like a toy. It's a toy that you can, it's a toy. It's an awesome toy. Yeah.
It's so much fun, right? It's like
so much fun.
It's I can be like what I discover is it's very engaging. So I can just pick up my instrument, and when I find like a nice phrase, I just loop it, and more ideas coming naturally, right?
Yeah. It's the quick way to get going, and also it gives us a chance to hear our own thing straight away. And we make a good loop, and you hear it, and you start loving yourself, going, "Yeah, man!" And then when you start stacking layers on top, you start thinking, "Whoa! I made all of that by just and it gives you it's a buzz because it sounds cool." And yeah, so it just meant that we could go do gigs, and you didn't need drummers and bass players and stuff. It could just be me with my loop station, Lil Rhys with a mic, and we can do gigs at clubs late at night time, just the two of us, and that was cool.
Also, something I noticed when I mentioned because I did my masters in looping at the Conservatory of Amsterdam. Also,
you do a masters in looping?
Yeah, I mean, I will explain you the story.
Who teaches that course? See if they want to give me a job.
No, I mean, I did a thesis in electronic music, and my subject was about looping. So I pick up the subject, and then it's where I started.
I was imagining like a whole looping department, and there's a head of looping and a faculty that just does looping, and there's maybe a class that just does the boss pedal, and there's just a class that just does Ableton. I don't know, but yeah, obviously
it will be in the future. I'm sure this is gonna be in the future. I keep saying to my teachers because I will explain you my journey. I'm an engineer. I studied engineering and also music at the same time, and I worked as an engineer. But I quit my job and I did my masters in electronic music. And when I went there, I went with my boss pedal, but soon I got the limitations of the pedal, and then I said, okay, I wanna do looping, but I want to do a lot more. I mean, I want to be more flexible with the rhythms. I want to be more flexible with effects. A lot more flexibility than the pedal would give me, actually. So that is how I started developing LiveLoop. And one of the things I had to talk in the thesis what live looping does, and what are the benefits of live looping for a musician. And I also realized that you become a better musician when you do live looping.
Well, that's you absolutely do, man. Like that. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there, but also I can hear my dog barking.
No.
Just come up here if you want. But you're right, because that's the key to improving, is to be able to hear yourself. So when I was studying music, the idea was to record yourself on a tape and play it back, and you learn so much by auditing yourself because you're your own biggest, and the live loop just gives you that A/B function straight away. And it's fast road to improvement for sure. Sorry, please continue. I interrupted.
No, I was talking about that is good for improvement, like for timing, for your sound, for I don't know, and quick ways to compose. It's something. Is this word that I used during my thesis about improvisation? When you are doing live looping, you are composing and improvising at the same time. And I feel this is a cool thing to do. And also, as what we said before, I come back to this because I think this is very important. It's very engaging. It's very fun to do. And and the guys who hasn't done it yet, they have to try it once, and they will see wow. And also something I also want to share in line of what we're talking now is that it's not the first time that I hear like when I first saw somebody doing live looping, I was like, I'm amazed, and it's not the first time that I hear that. Like the people who never have seen live looping before and they see it for the first time, for them it's like a blow mind technique, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and if I can add to that, I also know that some artists have a bit of doubt into getting into live looping, and sometimes I have the feeling that it's also a technique that's a bit underestimated. That you know, in the sense of many see it as maybe kind of basic, that you do a very simple build up, you know, beats, bass lines, a melody, and that's it. But I think you can actually get very creative with that.
Yeah,
And maybe,
man.
yeah, Mikey, you can tell us.
Yeah, we did. I did it for a long time, you know, over 10 years, and it does for me. It got really boring, like after all that time. But it was good to us. It was awesome. We could make a living doing that, and sort of transitioning from street to gigs and better gigs and that. But but also with the limitations that you mentioned before, you know, we were constantly figuring out workarounds, and because all of these pedals are actually designed, or were originally designed and aimed at guitarists. They're all guitar pedals, and especially with effects and stuff. So trying to figure out workarounds for all sorts of problems where you'd think, well, it can't do this, it can't do that, but yeah, it totally can. And sometimes you got to come up with some tricky hacks to make it do it, which was really fun. But I felt like I really did exhaust. I mean, out of the pedal that I used to use, I still loop, you know, and I use this other pedal now. I'm sure, yeah, you guys will want to talk about that later. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that generic build a song and kill a song. You know, back in the day when I first saw Ben FX, you know, what he could do was make these sections. He could go to a hook, go to a verse, go to a thing, bring parts in and out. And I guess that if I think I'd seen it a couple of times before maybe, but they must have been only like the single loop station thing where they just build and build and kill. But Ben told me that before he had the RC50, which he'd only just got when we first started making music and that, he would let the same beat run for like 5 songs sometimes, especially at the long day of busking. In fact, you can hear on the Live on the Street album, the very original old CD that he had at that time, he did that, just let that one beat roll for a couple of songs and build new songs. He could make that interesting. So you're right. I think a lot of people are bored with looping because it's old. It's kind of old now. Like when 10 years ago to 15 years ago, it was kind of new and really interesting. And people have done a lot of cool stuff and continue to do so. But you've got to be really inventive. It really is about the song. So that sort of initial, oh, wow, that sort of initial impressed, blown away vibe probably isn't as significant anymore because they've seen it all, you know, and beatboxers have gotten so next level. But yeah, it's an amazing tool. You know, yeah, I still loop on all my gigs, even if it's not beatboxing and that, but, you know, looping keys and looping bass parts and horn parts and stuff, but just in a different way than that sort of soul relying on an RC50 to go and do the whole gig is, yeah.
Cool. Well, I think if we go to this part, maybe I think all of those watching are, and also us, we are curious.
Is anyone watching?
Yeah, we have some people watching.
Yeah, that's on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about your setup.
Yeah, man. I love talking about that. I have coronavirus has given me the opportunity to sort of make a new setup. So yeah, it's just been building, I guess. I haven't really done loop station gigs for a couple of years. I've been busy with touring and recording with WFX, of course, but also the Allergies here and a few other cool recording jobs I do. And then my project sort of, started turning into a different sort of instrumental thing with a friend of mine, Jimvincible, who's amazing. He's actually a bass player. He's quite a well-known bass player in Bristol, but he's also a virtuosic finger drummer on samplers. Just unbelievably good. He's an amazing musician. So I started dedicating my personal music time to just jamming with him, but now I've got all this other stuff that I can do. So yeah, so I should talk about the loop station. That's the thing that people are most interested in.
Yeah.
Because I think it's interesting how you have your whole setup built, and how you also use, because that's also one of the points of today, is the fact that you and Josep both are instrumentalists, and you have introduced, the saxophone, but I think you also play iwi, and how do you actually use your saxophone with your gear. And I think this is also an interesting point to compare between the hardware you use and Giuseppe's setup with the software. So maybe we can start with you to show us a bit about how you do that.
Okay, well,
amplification is interesting for us. How do you
say that again?
The amplification, how you bring the sound of the saxophone to the looper.
Okay, well, in this setup, in my traditional setup, in my old setup, that's just like a multi effects pedal and a loop station. But in this setup, I actually have two loop stations. I have a Boss 5. Can you see this? Can you see what I'm pointing at?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a Boss 505 at the top there, but I'm not using that as a live looper at the moment. But of course I can record and loop into that. But what I'm using as the most vital part is the Headrush looper board. Can you see that on the floor?
Yeah.
So that pedal is a game changer. It's a real game changer, that pedal. It's a loop station, and it's got some pretty gnarly effects in it as well. Like it's quite powerful and sounds very, very good. And the interface is really interesting, and its capabilities are really great. So I've been using that. It's got tons of inputs. It's got its connectivity city in the back there. So the way I've got it sort of going at the moment, in fact, the way it's rigged up now is for recording, for the little videos I do on Instagram and that. But essentially, I have these synthesizers here getting grouped in a mixer and going to a stereo input. So it's got these 4 big analog inputs on the back of the Headrush pedal, multi inputs, XLRs and jacks. So I use 2 of those for all the keys. I use the next one for the iwi, and I use the next one for a microphone for the saxophone. So essentially, I mean, for recording, it goes through the mixer first, but at a gig, essentially, and one of the inputs is taking my microphone. I might run it through the mixer with a preamp, but I don't really need to for my live setup, because I use a Beta 58, and the effects that I use in the Headrush pedal can give me that control and gain, and I use compression and reverb and delays and stuff, but also gates and stuff for different live situations. I've got just a simple on-off switch that I run the microphone through first, which on my old setup I used to have like an A/B switch, which would have the microphone and the iwi, and I would select which one's on, which one's off, which meant that whenever I was looping the iwi, the microphone wasn't live, and that was cool.
So you were using a gating system. Yeah.
No, not on the old setup. And in fact, on this one, I only use it if I absolutely have to. Otherwise, I just have it. I don't use a gate. But a big boomy club, I might put it on just in case I forget to turn off the microphone with that switch that just sits next to the pedal. It's just there at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I have all of that coming out in different ways. So I can send, so the cool thing about the head rush pedal is the audio routing. That's one of the cool things. You can do it any way you want. And there's a bunch of outputs. So for example, I might have all my direct input coming out. It's the same. The RC50's got sub outputs. So it's essentially the same as that, but with ultimate control. You can send anything anywhere, including the headphones count as another stereo output assignable to anything. And also the track settings. So what we would call phrases on a Boss pedal, they call tracks on this, but you can set it that just say mic bleed isn't that basically you can the audio routing can affect both your monitoring and your input and your track and your loops and stuff as well. And then the way the effects banks work is quite interesting as well. It has so many cool things it can do that that none of the other pedals can do. So I'm a big fan of this thing.
Okay, maybe you can show us live a bit how it works if you want to.
Well, yeah, I mean, so the way I might have it set up the way I've got it set up right at the moment is it's essentially just blank. It's just blank, and I might just say loop the keys and the bass into it. But I've got a cool beat and some vocal samples in. This is how I'll do it at a gig, and this is how I've been doing those videos. So I have vocals and beats often up in that top sampler there. So that's also the MIDI master that tells everything. So when I press play on that, it can start playing. You can start playing the loop station. It tells the synth the tempo, which is handy as well for arpeggiators and that, and the chaos pad for its effects as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool. This one, the way I'm using it, so it's let's have a look here. So I can arm it, right? So that's just armed. It's not doing anything. And that's armed to record as well. So as soon as I press play on the master up here, that will start recording. In fact, I've got to turn on the speakers. Let's do a little sound check. Tell me if you can hear this. Is that a bit louder?
Yeah.
Yes.
1 second. I've got a little PA down here behind this camera. Why isn't that one on? Okay. Hold on a second. I'm really sorry about this. It'll only take me 1 second to figure this out. I want to take that out, and I want to put that in. All right, that should sound better. That's more like it. Yeah, so I'll press play on this. It'll start the drums and the vocal sample. That starts recording, and I'll loop the keys a couple of times around or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. And also, it only starts it on ones that you want it to start on. So you can assign all of this. So that didn't start. That's just a one-shot sample. It won't start on one-shot sample. So I go. That's looping now, right? That's just a key. Put another layer in. So I've got the keys, and I might just add a bass line. Arm it. So yeah, I can loop everything on separate tracks. And I've got these effects here.
many tracks do you have there?
So down here, I've got 4 tracks to record on down here, stereo, and 4 on that one. And I can have them separate. In fact, I've got a display here, so it gives you mixes. It gives you this what they call the timeline display, which gives you a waveform. So you can see the waveform. You can have things in sync, out of sync. You can have everything set up every different which way and unique. You can have it audio routed into any different way for any different input. And so for this song, for example, I've used 2. I've got one with the keys, one with the bass. I might end up looping some sax. If just say I start playing a saxophone solo and I'll drop out the keys, the bass is rolling. The drums are up here. I can bring them in and out or glitch them up on the effects here. And then I'll use another phrase for looping the saxophones now. And so I've still got one free for if I come up with anything. The cool way about this is that I can segue between songs, because essentially the Chaos pad is a sampler as well. So at the end of the song, I've made a cool song. I've got different sections, been bringing the parts in and out. Now I'm ready to change songs. All the drums and vocals are up here. All the loops I've just recorded are down here. So the way I segue it is I grab a 2-bar or 4-bar sample of what I've looped up, sample that into the Chaos pad live, stop everything else, but the audience doesn't hear that. It's just a seamless transition. Now the Chaos pad's running that loop, and I can put a little effect on it while I just cue up the next song on the RC505, cue up the next song, drop the Chaos pad out, boom, start the next song. Or even press play on that and fade up the next song, mix them in, especially if the tempos are the same. If you click to the next song, it'll seamlessly start the next patch on the next bank on the 505. So there's loads of cool tricks, man. I use heaps of different little tricks of how to do these things. Yeah.
That's cool. And how does the saxophone get into all the...
So the sax essentially the same as that microphone. Is that on? Hold on a second. Yeah. So the microphone is going into the loop station, and I've got effects that I assign to that microphone, reverb and delay and stuff, and then I can control some of those parameters with the expression pedal. Which is fun. So yeah, you can choose a bunch of parameters that it will muck around with. For me, it's usually like delay feedback time and delay mix. That's mainly what I use it for with saxophones. With a synth or with the iwi, you just might have it to be cranking filters or LFOs and whatever.
Yeah.
So with this looping pedal you said you have 4 tracks, and then you can overdub, I guess, so you can have...
Oh yeah, and the cool thing is you can peel. It's got these menus here, man. You would love this pedal if you're into... I mean, I know you would, because I know you're into looping. So you can do loads of things in advance, but you can do all this cool stuff on the fly that you can't do on any of the other pedals, right? With 2 taps of your foot, you can change the length of anything. And if you're asking for more length of just say it's a 2-bar phrase and you're now asking it to be 8 bars, it just copies it across. If it's an 8-bar phrase and you want it to be 2, it just takes the first 2. It's beautiful, right? You can also do your mixing and segueing down here, because there's a speed. You can change the speed on the fly, which is pretty fun for one song in a set perhaps. There's a reverse here. You can fade tracks in and out. You can choose the amount they fade in and out, which is nice for when you're working out your set. So you know that if you press fade, you got it saved for that song. If you press fade for that part on beat 1, it will fade out by the end of the loop that you wanted it to, so you can have all that. It will drop things in different keys. You can peel back layers. So that's the other thing that you can't do on any other pedals, is you can stack things up, record all over the place, record on track 1, over on track 2, over on track 3, over, you can record everywhere, and then you can still at any point peel off any layer that you've recorded anywhere. And then a really quick clear function for everything down there. There's a bunch of other stuff it does. The effects are actually quite exciting on this thing. So yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
It sounds a very interesting pedal, and the reason I started developing this LiveLoop it was as you saw, you content the limitation, and then you found this pedal which helps you to beat those limitations.
I mean, it has its own limitations as well. There's things that I used to be able to do on the RC50, super quick things I used to be able to do. It's just different, and there's always a workaround. Like there are people who have told me, they might tell me a particular gripe they have with an RC50 or whatever, and they'll say, well, it can't do this. And I'm like, but it actually can. And if it's just it's some of the tricks we use, you wouldn't think of what they are. There's often a workaround. There's always always a workaround. Yeah, almost.
Yeah, almost.
But
No, sorry.
No. Sorry, continue.
No, you carry on.
No, I was curious to know was Josep his experience on the limitations he encountered with the pedals.
Yeah, actually,
yeah.
Actually, what I wanted to say is that all the limitations you said and everything that your looper does is one of the issues I also encounter, and I put all these features in the software in LiveLoop.
Yeah.
So I feel that everything you're doing with your pedal can also be done with the software, and my intention with this software is to be the professional looping software, which all the features that all these pedals do can be will be there in a software. So this is our mission, and this is what we are working on, and it's amazing that I can see, because I didn't know this pedal you're talking about, and I can see a lot of similarities also regarding the outputs. You said you can send this everywhere, and that is also something I found. I wanted to send the loops also each track in different output. So this is something I also did with LiveLoop, like where I can send to each loop to a different speaker, for instance. And also the fade in and fade out. That is a very cool feature, right? That there was no other hardware. The boss doesn't have that, and it's very musical.
But I mean, but we used to do it anyway. Like we used to do a fade out. So what I would do at the end of a song is I'd go down on my knee. I'd hit tempo and that was on the master, right? And then I would take the phrase knob and blend it as I'm fading it out. I'm slowing it down as well, speeding it up as well quickly as you fade, and then and like there was just so many ways around. When Boss made that pedal, they never thought that you would use that as a mixing tool. This combination, but you can. And so that very same feature, I can totally do that on a Boss pedal as well. So there's other ways of doing it. The cool thing is MIDI and syncability, but I mean, there was workarounds. There were some really cool workarounds that we had for syncing loop stations anyway, where they didn't need to be connected by MIDI, and it didn't matter what, and it would never ever go out of sync. And we came up with some cool ways of doing things over the years. Yeah. I mean, the software is cool. With your software, can you use an external pedal? Because like dudes like me, I have to have a pedal because my hands are busy. If it's not saxophone, it's keys or.
I use like this is look how thin it is, a MIDI controller basically. So just with this pedal I can control all the loops, and I can have different banks. This is the soft step, by the way. It's a really cool one. So yeah, I use this. You can use any MIDI controller, and you can map to the software however you want. So you can choose the MIDI controller and map this button to do whatever you want to do, basically.
And I think also a cool thing, because when you have your hands busy playing the saxophone or iwi, whatever other instrument you would play, then you have an audio trigger, right, Josep?
Yeah.
So you have a MIDI trigger, but I guess like one of the things about, there's a few inherent things about software that puts me off using software for a gig. In fact, it's probably quite a long list, because I mean, is that, you don't want me to talk about that?
Yeah,
No,
you don't say
it's
this is free
interesting.
of
Yeah.
course. We are learning
Well,
here.
I'm saying it to the software.
I can tell you my opinion, so it's
Yeah.
fine.
Well, the thing, there's a few things, right? Like, especially back in the day. So just say, and looping, I reckon that the most amount of loop performances are happening on the street. That's where people use it. They use it on the street. And so, firstly, taking a laptop on the street is out of the question, like just completely out of the question. Another thing is, and some of that, in fact, this is, for example, an RC50. I mean, the head rush pedal is quite an expensive pedal, but it's still cheaper than my MacBook. You know what I mean? And if I go to a gig, so there's that inherent risk. You're taking your MacBook. Plus, there is an inherent instability issue. No matter how good the code is, people's computers just mess up. I shouldn't be swearing, should I? People's computers, like how many times like in all the years that I've had computers, you know, they've frozen up and done weird things countless times. But my RC50 never glitched once. It's a standalone thing. Also, the punishment that it can take as well. I'm very, very heavy-handed and footed. So I used to break RC50s by hitting the pedal too hard. And if I've got it, it's laid out, it's at my feet. Also, there's that. And there's also my final reason for that I don't think I can want to use software is I don't like the look of a computer screen on a stage. It's an aesthetic. It's a purely aesthetic opinion. Like, and I know everybody has them. DJs have them. Everybody has them. Every band has a laptop on the stage, and I personally don't like that. It takes away some of the amazing mystery because. Sure, like all these things are doing the same thing. You know, they've all got computer chips in them. They're all computers. Right? They're all computers. They're all single-use computers, but there's no big screen. And so I think for a stage, when you've walked into a club and I don't know, when I go and see a really cool band and there's that vibe when you come in and you see that live band and you don't see any computer screens. That's just a purely personal thing. And it's also that part of my reason is purely aesthetic as well. But Miles Davis said, if it looks good, it sounds better. And I just don't think it looks good on a stage. I don't want to have a bright screen. It could be so many bands we see are just pressing play. You know, I'm doing shit here. I'm like pressing buttons. I'm recording things. I'm playing horn. Like I'm busy. And when I come out at the end of the gig, I'm drenched in sweat. Completely. So it was like everything. It was the biggest thing, and you do it every night. I know that could be the same and stuff, but I don't think people like computer screens. I think that's probably I think most people don't like computer screens on stages either.
I have my opinion about this. I think there are different things. One is probably your experience, and also it's regarding the generations. I feel that I mean, computers are not the same now than 10 years ago. Now are much more reliable. I mean, with a computer of 10 years ago, you couldn't run LiveLoop more instantly. You would have probably a lot of delay. But in the past few years, the computers have evolved a lot. In my case, why computer and not hardware? I understand what you say. And in a stage, you can actually hide the computer if you want to. I've seen bands doing that, and I've been considering you can hide that. Because when we discuss all the hardware you have, they are all small computers, basically. Smaller computers.
It is, but they're single use. They're designed to do one thing. See, people, I've done thousands of gigs, and I've done gigs with people who have computers, and what I've seen it happen, it doesn't happen very often, but a computer fucks out. It just happens. And if you're running your instruments, all that sort of stuff, if it's everything, then you can't do anything. Whereas I could take out any single piece of this, and I can still do a gig. If any one piece, if any 2, 3, in fact, all I need, at the end of the day, is one of these pieces, and I can do something. Whereas if the computer goes down, it all goes down. That's a problem.
And my question is, when you go to the gig, how many bags do you have on you? Can you go walking to the gig?
That's cool. That's cool for me. See, and you're right. You're absolutely right. I travel with heavy cases, big pelly cases full of all this stuff, plus with saxophones. But to me, that's how much I don't want to use a laptop.
Okay. For me, it was completely different. I was because I wanna do big tours and I want to travel and to bring my gear wherever I go. And so I used to have like all these pedals and everything. I was like, I want to do everything on a software. So everything is packed in a computer and I can do everything that I can.
I feel that, man. I do totally feel that. I'm running it through my head now going, yeah, you could just be traveling with a saxophone and a backpack. But this stuff, I can smash these buttons with my feet and magic comes out, and I can be in the middle of it. You know, I think the aesthetic thing, walking into a club and seeing instruments is awesome. Lots and lots of instruments, and seeing people doing things. And you're right about hiding it. I mean, look, it's probably a personal preference, and I see a lot of people who do awesome shows with computers on stage, like mind-blowingly good shows. So maybe this actual debate between hardware and software, I mean, it is very interesting, but at the end of that, it's also completely irrelevant because it's the music, and that's at the end of the day all that matters, and that goes before and after the equipment. And it's turning up and doing what you do your way, and you know what I mean. So yeah, I don't think it makes as big a difference as maybe I would have people believe, because this is the sort of thing we talk about all the time. You know, friends like you know, and who do this stuff, we talk about this all the time. But it's important to remember that it's the source. The source is the absolute only thing that really matters is the source of the sound.
And I think it's also, in the end, they are all tools, right? And the computer, you know, it's another instrument. You can look at it like this. I mean, I know, you know, as you said, also musicians that make their music live on stage with computers, and they do it absolutely amazing, and the computer just becomes one of the instruments in their setup, you know. So
and it is an important tool for me as well. Like, I love I'm talking to you on a computer, and I've got a computer, you know, and it's that's how we record our albums, that's how we workshop our ideas. To migrate it into my live show will still take some convincing, but that's only because it's not so much. And also, maybe I've misrepresented it as well. I've been making it sound like I'm extremely anti computers. Maybe what it is more so is how much I love these big heavy toys, you know. So it's
I understand that. I understand the connection you have with the hardware, because I also use hardware. I also have pedals and I have a POG like this harmonizer from Electro Harmonics, and I love the sound of that. So
but exactly. It's combining it. I shouldn't write it off. You're right. I shouldn't like totally write it off. And
basically,
I'm laboring
the reason I like computer is that computers, I mean, I'm a developer, so I can whatever comes to my mind, I can write code and make it happen. With hardware, it doesn't work like that. It's much the process is much slower. If you now, for example, you tell me, Josep, I would like to have this feature on LiveLoop, it would take me a couple of days, and you will have it running in your setup. If you say that to the hardware loopers, there is a ton of things they have to check before.
That's true. That's true. That's very true. With especially with like the big ones like Boss and that. But I'll just throw out there, like with the head rush pedal, they have like a beta testing team, and I'm on that, which is really great. But it's not like particularly hard to get on. Like that's the cool thing about some of these things that are coming out now, and that's all the same advantages with you. I like that. That's a huge bonus to the little guy over Roland, you know, and Akai or whatever. Although I do think Akai might have bought Headrush, but I don't know if that's true. But that direct thing, that's the way the world's going. We're going to be able to say, well, I want it to do this. You can talk to the guy who built it. I do like that. And like I put on that software that you sent me, and I jammed on it until my dog started barking for dinner. You know, I was having a great time. It's like I just quickly figuring it out, you know, going, oh yeah, so good. Oh yeah, so how do I get it to, oh yeah, sweet. And I got a loop going, and I was looping, man. It was the same feeling. It was the exact same feeling as it's the same thing. I was just playing with a couple of synths and an Iwi on your one. So yeah, I totally get it. There's going to be loads of people who are like, yeah, sick, because for me, I was, from the financial point that I made first, is it probably doesn't apply. It depends on which way you're looking at it, right? So I'm thinking to myself, well, I've got all this hardware that I really like, and I've got an expensive laptop. I don't want to take my expensive laptop to the gig, blah, blah, blah. But for other people, maybe the laptop is their only tool. They don't actually have all this stuff. And for them, it's perfect. If you're living in a city, putting it in your backpack, it may be like for yourself, it's just part of your arsenal. You know what I mean? So you've got instruments, you might have decks, you might have anything. So that the cool thing about the live looping is that people might want to use it for all sorts of things, not just Mr. Matey guitar, go and loop. It might be a DJ who wants to use it for all sorts of effects and mad fun time like that. And it's a wicked bit of software you got, dude. It's good.
And I think it's also, you know, the way you were saying before is, you know, every piece of hardware also has develops, right? So then you can do with one something that you couldn't do with the previous edition and so forth. I think that's what's also cool in when you speak of software, you know, that's something that you just have one tool in your computer and then it's continuously updated and all the features are in there. And it's also a way of, you know, something that you said, right, that you had to find ways to work around the hardware you had. Right. While what I know from Josep is that, you know, when he thought of the music and why he got into building LiveLoop, was that actually he wanted to play music as he envisioned it, but he was feeling limited by the gear. So then he had to develop ways, as you said, to work around it. So he had to develop his own ways of the machine actually playing the music as he envisioned it and not the other way around. So you don't want your tools and your machines to limit what you want to do, right?
Well, yeah, what you're saying there is that, in fact, developing this software was your workaround, right? Like, you needed a workaround, so you were like, I'm just going to make my own one, you know?
Exactly.
But that, and the thing about the limitations and its effect on the music, there's two ways of looking at it, because, for example, with, like, I can't remember there's a name for this, where when we are given infinite possibilities, we often do nothing. And when we're given limitations, it's much easier to make decisions. And so there's an experiment with, like, the chocolate bars. You know, you go into the petrol station, there's 10,000 chocolate bars. You're less likely to buy one than if there's 5 chocolate bars, different types. You'll choose one from 5. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that with art as well. So when I fire up the computer with everything with infinite possibilities, that isn't a magical land, but that's also, and it's a blank canvas. In fact, this, you know, you can even make the canvas.
Yeah, completely relate to that.
But with the restrictions, sometimes comes our best stuff, because so just say when we first get rolling on a 3-phrase loop station, you go, okay, I've got 3 phrases, I've got to work with this. And then you come up with something that is so sick that you wouldn't have necessarily come up with if you could have, you know what I mean? So sometimes the restrictions can positively influence the music. I think DubFX really developed his sound, and also being able to push being able to play different sections and be able to play composed arrangements of songs, but having to make the machine do it. They influenced each other, and that contributed to the sound. It did for me as well, and for other loop stations. So sometimes I think other artists will tell you the same. Sometimes when you're making it's much easier to work on other people's stuff than your own stuff sometimes. Like you might feel like you need to make an album, but you've got, it's just not happening. But that band you work with sends you a tune and they want you to do a horn part for it. And suddenly you come up with your best work ever and it's on their tune. But you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think there's something to be said for both ways.
Definitely. And
limitations are good. I mean, unnecessary. But I want to make a point into this limitation. You mentioned before, like you have been doing live looping for a lot, and you got bored somehow. So this is what I felt also, and what I felt of 20 years of live looping that is going on more or less now. And I envision as well that we need new ways for live looping, because it's getting boring. I think we are constantly breaking limitations and new limitations coming. So I mean, there are always new limitations. And but I mean, this is just a point to say that we are always breaking new limitations and new limitations come in. So we are always evolving into a certain way. And what I pretend to do also with live loop is to bring live looping 2.0. So make a reset of everything that I have done before and think in a different way.
Yeah, man. I love it. Yeah, boy, that's good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this I think it's also a story, you know, when he mentioned about the masters and you said like, okay, can you do a master in live looping? Actually, was it so, Josep, that your teachers told you when you said that you wanted to research into live looping to not do it?
Yeah, they didn't want to because they were like, it's boring. You know, you record something that is 4 bars, then you record something on 4 bars and everything is 4 bars, everything is 4, everything is symmetrical, and they didn't like that. And
well, that's how most people do it.
That's exactly. But they didn't think, but I was thinking forward. They said, but live looping means recording live. It doesn't have to be 4/4. It doesn't have to be always the same loop. It doesn't have to be syncing the same way. It can be in many different ways. You can make a loop of 3/4 and another loop of 5/4 and synchronize it with that and see what happens. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. And but I guess that they had some sort of preconception about what it was because they're used to seeing so they haven't seen, like, there's some really good people. There's some people who are really good at using it compositionally. I don't know if you've seen like Bellatrix and Grace Savage over here. They're both beatboxers and amazing musicians. They use the loop station really interestingly, and they're younger than me, and I think they came to loop stations, you know, a bit after we did, but they were doing it way better. Like, just, it was like the Tool, and it was interesting. And so sometimes you see these people doing it in ways that we haven't seen on the old Tool as well. You go, well, that's pretty cool. But I like it. You know, there are people out there using them in incredible ways. But I like the idea of it being a tool, or also unnecessary or completely necessary. You know, and sometimes that 4-bar loop, like, how many of your favorite songs are in fact just a 1-bar loop? Like, heaps of them. And so if you've got the right, you know, so sometimes it's okay to go back to just doing that 2-bar loop and just letting it sit there for 5 minutes and everyone loves it, and then you move on. It's both. Everything's both.
Maybe we don't have that much time left, but maybe because, you know, to do a bit of comparison, maybe Josep, you can show us like very quickly a bit how's your setup with the software. Maybe just like a short summary of
I mean, since we
what does it mean to have all this setup that Mike is talking about, but with LiveLoop.
Yeah, so since we are instrumentalist, I want to also show how I amplify my clarinet.
Oh yeah?
So I have you know this rubber hair is a pickup microphone.
I know about these, yeah.
So the cool thing about that is that this goes straight to my effects. So all the effects are running from here.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna switch screen now. So so the way my setup looks is so I just have the software and a bunch of MIDI controllers, and that yeah, I know, but you can hear, right? So what I do, I run the software, the clarinet through the software, and then I put effects. And I mentioned this harmonizer, the POG, and I like it very much. So, and I call it something that is included in LiveLoop, and you can make like intervals as well. And let's see. Okay, I have to turn on the audio. So something interesting that I like to do is I like to put effects on the clarinet and then to loop those effects. So this is what I want to show about this harmonizer and how I make effects with the instrument and then I use it in the loops. So I use like, for example, I'm going to make a loop now, and I do. Well, this have to set. So I just can't do it with my feet. So and I can control everything very fast with the MIDI controllers that I have here.
That, you know, I mean, we didn't actually end up talking about effects very much as well. One of the things that that needs to be addressed, well, that never got addressed except Headrush, is that every time you add a layer, you add gain. You know what I mean? You double up that gain every single time.
Yeah.
So that could be your USP. Like if you could have compression and side chaining and post effects, that means that just say that will start automatically, you know, like limiting, like a big fat limiter, so that first loop sounds really loud, and when you've got 5 loops going, it doesn't sound like the sound guy. So the sound guy doesn't have to do nothing, and it happens. Think about that. That'd be the one.
Yeah. Oh, that's a cool feature. Yeah. Yeah. That's
now he will be busy the next couple of days with.
Well, just something to that, or maybe there's another clever way to address that one issue. So, yeah, that's. Yeah.
I mean, what I do now, I lower the master, but lowering the master is not. It's not what you say, because then it's getting louder all the time.
Yeah.
So, and what I have when I'm overdubbing, I have this feature of feedback, so I can lower the feedback. So if I make a new layer, the old layer goes down a little bit. So this is possible with LiveLoop as well to do. Yeah,
and you should have it that it's controllable, maybe through a compressor or something like that, where you can set up the parameters as in advance to what it will do automatically. That would be very interesting.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Cool. Thank you for the add-on.
Well, I somehow have the feeling that this conversation can go on forever and ever, just comparing stuff. And also, I think in the end, it comes down to what every musician feels comfortable, and you have to feel comfortable with the tools that you are using.
Right. I mean, like with the way that we've been able to get around those things, that's the beauty of the 3-phrase loop station, right? Is because you can sort of disguise it. Before we had, you know, a mixer on stage with all our stuff to be able to control this. you'd have very separate parts. You'd have a beatbox that's got a really fat low end and a big snappy snare. You'd have to find a bass part that sits in beneath that. And then you say Ben's voice or my horn parts, they would occupy different parts of the EQ of that spectrum. So that was a way of cheating it, but a clever software. Sorry, yeah, I know we've got to wrap this up, but a clever software way of that would be interesting. Yeah, just like what you'd have on a mixer, what you'd have on a post effects, on a mixer that you'd have post your loop station and all that. But
yeah. This is how also the way I thought of LiveLoop. I was thinking of a mixer, and LiveLoop has like. If you're familiar with Mixer, LiveLoop does very similar things with how you route the audio, how you send and return. So I feel like LiveLoop is a looper inside of a mixer somehow.
Okay.
It's interesting. I invite you to give it more try if you want to, and
Well, I'll have another play with it, man. Yeah, I will.
Yeah, and you can always ask me more questions if you want to, and I can help you start. To make you set up if you decide to run LiveLoop for yourself.
Yeah, man. No, I'll definitely mess around with it. Keep me updated with it as well, for sure.
Yeah, sure.
That's cool. Well, thank you both so much. I think it's been a very interesting talk, and what we hope for actually was to make some comparison between your two setups and looking at what gear can do and then what software can do. So I think the future it's exciting, and as we concluded, it's up to the music and the artists to use the tools and make what's actually it's important with them. So to make the music.
Absolutely, and that should be like the selling point, because with the live looping software, it makes it extremely accessible for people. And instead of making the comparisons, for example, maybe the way to show it off is that it is such an easy way to get up and running with the tool that you already have, about the limitless possibilities straight away, rather than, because they are two different worlds, like they don't really compare. Of course, like a big SUV is a vehicle and a mini minor is also a vehicle, but they're not competing in the same space. They're different markets. So maybe the comparison in terms of a marketing sense or whatever, maybe that's not so even that helpful. Because they are so different. And in fact, maybe converting hardware people might be in some ways futile, whereas grabbing all those beatboxers, all those rappers, all those dudes who have already got a laptop in front of them as their entry point. Anyway, I know we've got to end this, but
no, I mean it's definitely the point, and I think one of the reason of comparison, it's also that there's actually no live looping software on the market. So people are, when they think of live looping, right, they always think of the hardware and the pedals.
Or there's stuff you can do with Ableton, right? Yeah. Like I've seen people do, be using Ableton Live and recording live into it. But that is a huge piece of software. I mean, that is a really interesting live tool as well. So that's something to consider as well. That's the biggest player in that sort of software world is Ableton Live, and its workflow and its functions, especially with the their own outboard gear that they've got for it. I mean, that's a pretty hefty player. So that I guess that's probably actually your biggest
definitely. And I think also the difference there is that live looping into Ableton, it's actually a feature, a part of the software that they have. But while live loop, it's totally dedicated to.
It's like the software version of a hardware kit.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. That's cool. Then maybe it should look a bit more like a pedal. I don't know, but especially when every next generation, so the next generation or two of laptops and every computer, they'll all have touchscreen in the next setup. So prepare for that. If it looked a bit like a loop station, I could go and just hit it, and it was Then we might be talking. So,
cool.
There are some.
Well, you never know what.
There are some live loop users. What they do is they use Ableton for beats or for other things, and then they run live loop together for looping, and so because they can be synchronized together. And
Yeah.
they like LiveLoop because it looks like the session view of Ableton.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It does look like Ableton. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's cool, man. Awesome. Well, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think there's a lot of.
We'll have to
thoughts
cut it
there.
off, or else we'll just keep going.
No, it's cool. I mean, that's why we came together today to talk about this, and it's still, I think it's as we said during the talk. Also, there's a lot to explore, still a lot to talk about, and I think it's good to have these kinds of talks and look at what's out there and what's possible, and also what can we do in the future.
Yeah.
So for that, I would like to thank you again, both for today, especially you, Mikey, for making the time and joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. That was really fun.
I hope
thank you very
we
much.
will also see you again live soon.
Yeah.
I don't know how the situation is now. It's all very uncertain and weird, but hopefully soon.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, talk soon. Thank you, everyone.